This video is how to pick the right Dogo Argentino puppy for you. Coming at you from Dogo Argentino, USA. First things first, you 100% need to know the BEAR status of any puppy before you buy it. BEAR stands for Brainstem, Auditory, Elicited, Response, and that's the hearing test we use to check the hearing of the puppy. White dogs, white horses, white cats, white rabbits, all of them have an allele that's linked to the all-white coat, which unfortunately is also linked to full or partial deafness. If you are new to Dogo Argentinos, I highly suggest you avoid, at all costs, adopting a partially or fully deaf animal because special needs animals in a large, strong, muscular dog requires special care, especially if you've never had a Dogo before. Okay, so the next thing you really need to consider is your primary purpose in adopting this family member. Now, most people have multiple purposes. For example, you might want a pet, you might want a hunter, you might want an obedience prospect, you might want a show confirmation prospect. Regardless of the reason that you want the puppy, you need to rank those in your mind from most important to least important. Because if you're looking for a show prospect because you hope to breed one day, what you're going to pay and what you're going to look for could be very different than if you're looking for just a hunter, or you're looking for just a pet, or you're looking for just an obedience dog. So know in your mind what is most important to you so that when you can discuss your prices, your contracts, and your availability, you know in your heart, this is my main priority. This is the thing I absolutely have to have in a puppy. Okay, next, gender, male or female. There are benefits to both. There are detriments to both. If you are new to Dogo Argentinos, a lot of people will recommend that you get a female because their temperaments are softer. I think that can be true. I don't think that is always true. In my particular line, my females have a much more dominant personality than my males. My males are much more laid back. My females would be far better hunters, even though I don't personally hunt my dogs, than my male would be. Which is not to say he has no instinct, but the females, they just have more drive to find something, latch onto it, and not let go. He's like, are we going for it? Yes? No? And he'll just toe the pack line for sure, but he has a much softer personality. So just bear in mind that is, I think, essentially a myth going around whether males or females, their temperament is harder or softer. Consult the breeder. If you are wanting a hard temperament, if you want a protection dog, ask them, because those instincts actually manifest very young, and chances are good your breeder, who knows their puppies best, can recommend the dog that's most likely to be good at that particular sport. So one of the things that you want to think about in terms of gender is whether or not you plan to keep the dog intact or not. If you plan to keep the dog intact, and recent studies suggest that's a very good idea prior to 2 years old, due to a long-standing medical study that involved thousands of dogs showing that hip dysplasia is strongly linked to altering a dog before the year 2. If you've decided to go with an intact dog, either up until they're 2 or permanently, and you get a female, you're going to have to deal with her estrus or her heat cycle. If you go with a male, you're going to have to deal with his puberty. It doesn't matter which dog you get, there's definitely behaviors that go along with them being intact. And if those are things that you can't handle, perhaps it would be best that you get an older dog that's already reached the age of 2 and can be altered with significantly less risk to developing hip dysplasia. So another thing about gender is size. Males are traditionally larger, females are traditionally smaller. So size may be an issue for you. If you're looking for a great big Dogo Argentino, then chances are a male is going to be a better fit for you. Now, in terms of affection, I think both dogs have affection, and the way they express their affection is a little different. Now, in my lines, my females are very hands-on in their affection. They want to physically touch you when they want to give or receive affection. My male is much more standoffish in terms of affection. He wants it, he does seek it out, but he's not in your face the way the females are. As a matter of fact, I would say my male is a very, very affectionate dog, but he isn't necessarily a pushy dog. He will sit on the sidelines and wait. So age is a consideration in terms of getting a puppy. In my opinion, and it's just my opinion, feel free to differ with me, my opinion is the sooner that you get your puppy after 8 to 10 weeks old, the stronger your lifelong bond will be if you're able to invest good amounts of time when that puppy is young. If you don't invest good amounts of time, then it really doesn't make that much of a difference if you get a puppy, say at 10 weeks versus 12 weeks. But if you're able to take some time off work or structure your work differently so you can spend long swatches of time with your new puppy, I do think you will develop a stronger bond overall. Because when puppies are young, their brains are open. It's one of the reasons that it's actually easier to obedience train a puppy, because a puppy doesn't have discernment where a teenager does. Puppies accept the rules. This is the way it is. They don't often challenge them. Teenagers are like, yeah, but why do you want me to sit before I get my dinner? It's a lot easier to obedience train a puppy. So, you can obedience train any dog at any age. You can obedience train any dog at any age. Let me reiterate. You can obedience train any dog at any age. It's just how much work do you want to put into it. Puppies learn very quickly because they are developing so rapidly. Their brains are open. You actually frequently put a lot less effort to teach a puppy than you do to teach an adult. So in my last litter, just an example, my puppies could all sit for their dinner by the time they were 6 weeks old, because puppies learn very quickly. They're open. Adults are much slower. It doesn't mean that they can't learn, and it doesn't mean that they aren't intelligent. It means that they consider what you're asking them to do before they do it. And puppies just don't have that kind of discernment. They're like, oh, you want me to sit before I get dinner? Cool, doing it. I like dinner. So just bear that in mind, that age may be important to you. There are a lot of dogos that are available for adoption, and most of those dogs are going to be older. The one thing I would say about getting a Dogo Argentino, anything under a year is considered a puppy. Basically, 1 year to 2 years is considered a young adult or a young dog, and 2 years and up, it's starting to reach maturity. In this breed, I would say 6 years old is about middle age, because these dogs can live on the low end 9 years, on the high end 15 years, 16 years, depending on what they feed and the lines that they come from and how much exercise they get. Just a personal tip, if you want a long life with your dogo, plenty of exercise, quality nutrition, and spending time with your dog. Dogs do have a social nature to them. It is my opinion that dogs that have lots of social contact, they are going to live a little bit longer, just like dogs that have better quality nutrition. And that makes sense. If you were a person and you ate nothing but cupcakes and pizza, your chances are probably not going to be as in good health as someone who ate a balanced diet of fresh produce and lean meats. Totally makes sense, right? Okay, so the thing about adopting that I do want to point out, most dogs that are surrendered and then rehomed or adopted out are going to have behavioral problems. They'll have a form of canine PTSD due to the fact that they have been uprooted from their family of origin. A lot of times people love this breed because of the way they look, and hate this breed because of its drive and its desire for exercise. And a lot of people are not dedicated to obedience training or exercising the dog to the level that it actually requires. And then the dog either becomes destructive, develops a different type of behavioral problem, is just generally miserable, and then people rehome this dog. Well, that dog is now having some stability issues a lot of times. So if you're a brand new owner, I honestly do not recommend you adopt, because chances are that dog's going to have some issues through no fault of the dog's own. But a puppy is much more likely to not have those kinds of issues. You're going to know exactly the background of the puppy. You're going to have that puppy be very friendly and social if you're going to a quality breeder. One of the other things I like to recommend is, if at all possible, figure out what the puppy has gone through as a puppy with the breeder. So, for example, I put a lot of effort into my puppies to make sure that they're highly socialized to unusual and novel environments and noises. So, for example, fireworks don't scare my puppies. Loud bangs don't scare them. They're like, oh, that's a noise. Okay, cool. And they move on. If your breeder has not gone through the immense effort to desensitize the dog for sounds, strangers, new environments, those types of deficits actually can manifest and can be very stubborn to unseat in a dog. Not impossible, but requires a lot of work. So if your breeder is not doing early neurological stimulation, I would be like, what are you doing with your life, breeder? I'm questioning you. I don't know. It's just something that I think is important. And also it's something that actually benefits the dog for the rest of its life. So if they don't know what ENS is, I don't know, maybe move on to a different breeder. Okay, so the next thing to consider besides age, gender, and bear status, I would love for you to consider color. Now, obviously, dogos are primarily white, but quite a number, it's not a huge number, but there is a number of dogos that have recessive genes, which disqualify them from being bred or being shown, but they still can be great hunters, terrific protection dogs. They are the same breed, of course, they just have what we would consider a coat flaw. So, for example, if you have a dogo that 50% of its head is black, that is a coat fault, because you can only have one small pirate spot, less than 10% of the head, in front of the ears, primarily associated with the eye. So if that is not an issue to you, that dog is still going to be a great dog. It's still a rare dog. It just happens to have a coat fault, and occasionally you will see other little faults, usually related to the color. Like I have once seen a dogo that had one spot on its tail. I have seen a dogo with blue eyes, which is heavily linked to deafness, I might add, on the side of the blue eye. Not always, not every time, but it's more likely in a white dog with a blue eye or a white cat with a blue eye on the blue eye side, just as an example. So you do want to look at coat, and in my mind, this is my opinion, you might feel differently, but generally speaking, if the dog has any fault at all that disqualifies it from being bred, that disqualifies it from contributing its genetics to the Dogo Argentino variety, I think that dog should be a pet class, pet quality dog, and its price should be consequently lower. On the other hand, if you want a flawless dog, you are going to consequently pay more money because there's fewer of those. So coat color is something to consider. A lot of people love the pirate look, and they're great pets. But in the breed standard, it's written that any dog with a pirate spot is considered less desirable than a purely white dog. So just bear that in mind. You may love the way it looks, but it's not something I would strongly encourage someone to perpetuate simply because the breed standard says that's not the way it's supposed to be. Another thing that you consider, my number 5, is do you want the puppy's ears cropped or don't you? Because that is a limited time offer. The purpose of ear cropping, if you don't know, is for hunting reasons. A hog can latch onto a floppy ear and rip it off the head of the puppy. So if you are going to hunt, that is a primary interest of yours. If you're going to work your dog, and I encourage you to do so, whether it's obedience, whether it's show, whether it's hunting, I do think dogos do the best when they have a job to do. The breed standard favors the cropped ear. And there are several different croppings that you can get. You can get a battle crop, which is basically almost no ear. You can get a short crop. You can get a show crop. You can get a long crop. It's up to you what crop you go for. But that is something that will most likely raise the cost of the puppy because there is an additional cost and effort into cropping the ears. AKC further recommends the removal of front dew claws, so that could be an added cost as well. When you're looking at puppies, to me, there's several different things that I think are important. The purpose that you want the dog for, because just as an example, if you want to show in conformation and you want to breed that dog, looks and personality matter. If conformation is not important to you and breeding is not important to you, then looks don't matter very much at all, because the dog can be a phenomenal obedience dog, can be great at protection, and can have 2 big old spots on the head instead of 1. So just be aware that the purpose that you want the puppy for does affect the number of candidates that will be available in a given litter for what you're after. I think it's important to find a breeder that's reputable. Ask them about the goals of their breeding program. What are they trying to do? What are they trying to achieve? What type of personality are they trying to perpetuate? So, for example, I like that my male is a mellow male, and I like that my females are very drivey. If you're on the other hand, like, no, I want mellow females and a drivey male, then, you would look for lines that reflect what you're interested in having in your home. So I think it's an important thing to kind of talk to the breeder and get a sense of what their goal is with their breeding program. Something that you should consider is geographically where the puppy comes from. Puppies that come from developing nations or non-developed nations are more likely to have limited veterinary care and higher incidences of some very serious diseases. So bear in mind that you'll probably pay a lower cost. Just as a pure random example, if you got a puppy from the Ukraine, you will probably pay lower costs. But because puppies in the United States, our culture has a different view of the purpose of a puppy than they do in the Ukraine, be aware that puppy is likely to be socialized to Ukraine standards, not to American standards. So just bear that in mind. Also, you do have to, just a grain of salt, know if you're getting it from a developed nation, you're taking a lot of risk, because you don't know if the puppy that you see on the internet or if that you're seeing on Skype is the puppy you're going to get. You have no idea truly what the standards are in terms of socialization, obedience training, house trainings. You don't know much. It's a lot easier to do what they call hang paper on a puppy from a developing country than it is in the United States. And if you don't know what the term is, hanging paper means that the breeder is telling you it's coming from a certain female and male, and it's actually from a completely different set. Now, in the United States, we are starting to use genetic testing to prove the lineage of the puppy. This is extremely popular with American Pit Bull Terriers, and I think over the next 20 years is going to become more standard for all purebred dogs. But and I do genetically test my dogs for that reason. But just bear in mind that, if you're getting a puppy and it's super cheap and it's from a little developing country because their costs are lower to live and their costs are lower to raise a dog, you may not necessarily have a dog that's been hearing tested. You may not have a dog that's had its proper shots. You may not have a dog that's been socialized to American standards. Just do bear that in mind. So to a certain degree, bloodline does matter. Now, there is a benefit to getting a dog that wasn't bred in the United States. And Dogo Argentinos are a rare breed, which means that they are more closely related, also known as more closely inbred, than dogs that come from different countries and different established bloodlines. If you were to go to Argentina and get a dog from there, While all dogs are naturally going to be related to that dogo because they're all Argentinian, and at some point, if you go back to Argentina, they're all related to that, you might have a little bit of a distance genetically, which can be very helpful for your line. Same thing if you were to go to Russia or you were to go to Italy. Hopefully there's a few different genetic combinations available in those countries, and it can bring health and vigor to your line. So there is a benefit to getting dogs that are imported. My adult female was imported from Russia. So just bear in mind that sometimes there is a benefit to that. In terms of getting a puppy that's right for you, to me there's a really important and overlooked factor. How helpful is the breeder going to be to you once you have bought the puppy and taken it home? And there are breeders that want the best for their puppies, and they take a lot of time to screen. They don't sell to everyone. They are looking for a very specific clientele. So, for example, one of the things that I look for when I place a puppy is, do you have land? Do you have a yard of your own? It's not that you can't successfully raise a dogo in an apartment or in a townhouse that has a little postage stamp size lawn. You can, but it's a lot more work. It's a lot harder, and fewer people are going to do it long term. They might have every intention of doing it, but over time they just cease. But if you've got land and you've got a yard, your dogs are going to get good exercise, which they totally need. So, a breeder having standards is not a bad thing, and it's definitely something you should look for. You should want the person that's slightly picky about where their dogs are going. If you have somebody, like there's a breeder in the United States that more or less has a litter every 2 months, and that breeder produces a ton of dogs, probably 60 dogs or more a year, which is a lot. And, how much care those dogs get, I can't say. But a person who's breeding 1 litter a year, there is some hope in my mind that the person who's a smaller breeder is going to have more time invested because they're not getting fatigue or burnout from having litters constantly. It's something to consider. I do think that there's a benefit to people who do it regularly. They may have it down to a science. That doesn't mean that people who don't do it regularly don't have it down to a science. They may just choose to put in the work because it is a ton of work to have puppies. If you do it the right way, it's a ton of money. It's a huge investment. It's just something to bear in mind that, just because someone produces a dog doesn't mean they're doing the right thing by the dog. So a breeder that's picky is a good thing. It's helpful in my mind to ask about what is contained in the puppy contract. If you pick the first puppy that comes along and you don't thoroughly read the contract, and the contract has terms in it that you don't agree with, you can be stuck, and that might not be good for you or your family. So just read your contracts. A lot of people don't realize that breeding animals have breeding contracts, and those might require certain things of you. So just read your contracts, people. Read your contracts. I also think that a benefit to working with certain breeders is finding out if they're going to answer your questions or if they're going to act like you're dead to them once you leave their house with the puppy, or you pick the puppy up at the airport, however it is that the puppy arrives to you. Unfortunately, I have worked with dogs since birth. My mom bred dogs, trained dogs, showed dogs. I've done it my whole life. I've seen breeders throughout the years that once that dog has left the house, they don't want to know you. As a matter of fact, they're downright prickly. They don't want to answer your questions. I don't know if they're intimidated by you having one of their dogs, that they don't want to give you a leg up in the dog world. I don't know what it is, but I certainly have had my share of breeders who cease to speak to me, and so just bear in mind that not everybody is trying to help you out once you have the dog. I've always taken it for competitive reasons in the show ring. It does happen, so just be aware. If you're wanting somebody that's going to answer your questions, just make sure, hey, are you going to be available? Can I talk to somebody that has a dog of yours to see, what their experience has been, there's nothing wrong with asking for a reference. Can I talk to an owner of one of your dogs? Somebody that's doing the right thing should be like, yeah, let me make sure it's okay to give out their phone number. I'll get back with you. And that should be easy to do for them. Unscrupulous individuals, do bear in mind, could be lying, though. Just FYI. But it should be, easy enough to find somebody that, has the picture of the puppy living its life, going from little puppy to big puppy. That's a lot easier to show their commitment to the dog. Picking the right puppy for you is a lot about knowing yourself and being truly honest with yourself. Like if you in your family have a new baby, maybe getting a young puppy, which is also going to require a ton of investment in terms of energy and training, maybe that's just not the right time. Yes, you want a dog to grow up with your child, but maybe you need to wait till your child's a little bit older. Thoughts? If you are truly honest, I think you are going to be able to get the right puppy for you. If you are impulse driven, if you don't do a lot of research, you don't do a lot of thought, chances are you're going to get the wrong puppy for you. So just bear in mind that it's not a bad thing to really think about what matters to you, what your ultimate goal is, and having a breeder ask you about those things is a good thing. You should want a breeder that's like, hey, do you have a yard? Who's going to be home with the dog? How long does the dog need to be in the kennel? Does the dog need to be in the kennel? Someone that's discerning is more likely to be good to the dogs, and that's going to be good for you because they're going to produce better dogs. So if you are looking into breeders and that breeder has a web page that is not mobile responsive and hasn't been updated in 20 years, they might be breeding excellent dogs, but how would you know? There's no proof. And if on the other hand, you go to a breeder and they've got tons of videos of their dogs living life and you like what you see and you've got a reference and that breeder can talk to you about what the goals of their program is and they can help you out in the future. I don't know. I think that's valuable, especially if you have limited experience in a particular breed, because this is a very specific dog that is best suited for a very specific person. It's a serious dog breed for a serious dog owner. I don't honestly think this is a great dog if you've never had a dog before, if you have no experience with large dogs, if you have no experience with dogs that have a genetic background for protection, guardianship, and fighting, all of which is genetically programmed into this dog. This isn't maybe the best dog for you. And of course, a final thought about the price. The price is definitely something that needs to be talked about. I think it is a little bit of a white elephant in the room. It is, in my mind, absolutely positively true that price does not always equate into quality, but it often equates to quality. So if you see a price which is too good to be true, let's imagine that you're looking on Craigslist and you see a puppy for $200 on Craigslist that they swear is a purebred Dogo Argentino dog. It's possible that that's true, but I would say it's probably more likely not true. If you are wanting a dog that has obedience training built in or protection training built in, you could pay a lot. Really, the sky's the limit. I've seen protection dogs go from $15,000 to $500,000. It depends on what you're wanting out of the dog. Obviously, if you're getting a protection dog, there's a lot more training involved in that, and there's a lot more investment in that, and therefore the value goes up. And that's something that I think is generally reflected in price in general. So if you want a dog that has whatever your version of a perfect temperament is, and whatever your version of perfect looks are, and you want a dog that is going to have the potential to be bred in the future if you show it, and if you health test it and stuff like that, you're probably going to pay more than if you're getting a dog from somebody in the parking lot of Walmart who swears they know a lot about this dog and it is what they say it is. I've seen so many dogs in Dogo Argentino groups where it's fairly obvious by looking at the structure of the dog that it is not a Dogo Argentino at all. So if price is an issue, I personally think it's far better to save your money up and get the right dog than try to get a quote discount dog. Chances are you're going to get burned on that. Too good to be true. I mean, there is something to be said about that. Someone that has good quality dogs has invested a lot in those dogs. So for example, a dog can be microchipped. A dog has annual health costs. A dog might be genetically tested. A dog might be registered with multiple registries. A dog might have multiple titles, and that costs a lot to go to shows to get those titles. You know, you might get those titles in one show, you might get those titles over 20 shows. And if each of those shows cost you $1,000 and it took you 20 shows to get your title, that was a $20,000 investment above and beyond the cost of veterinary care, food, housing, not to mention time. I think that that's a huge, huge underrated cost of getting a dog is how much time did it take to produce the training, the temperament, and the titles that you see attached to the dog. And does that matter to your family? Do you need the bragging rights of saying like, my adult male, my adult female are multi-champions. They have won best of shows, best of breeds, first places. Do you want to be able to say that your puppy is produced by that? Or do you want to be able to say that, an unscrupulous individual in the country got two not very good examples together and bred them because they wanted to make money? It's something to think about. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go a particular way, but I think it's a good idea, personally. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please give us a thumbs up, hit the bell for notifications, like, subscribe, share, comment, and let us know if this has been helpful. Our goal here at Dogo Argentino, USA, is to help out new owners get to know the breed. Thank you and have a glorious Dogo day.